I'm Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Called the Coach, recorded on March 1st, 2019. Called the Coach is a resource for those who want to help others discover and use their strengths. We have Gallup experts and independent strengths coaches share tactics, insights, and strategies to help coaches maximize the talent of individuals, teams, and organizations around the world. If you have questions during this live webcast, if you're joining us live, there is a chat room. It's either below the video window or to the right, depends on your resolution. You'll see a chat window there. You do need to be logged into Google, but there's 3 little buttons on the upper right-hand corner. Choose that and then pop it out so you can put it anywhere on your screen. Ask us questions live. We would love to have them. If you have questions after the fact, or you're listening to the recorded version, you can send us an email, and this address is really good for any kind of questions you have, coaching@gallup.com. And of course, don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your coaching resources and training needs. You can also catch the video in both streaming and downloadable audio for offline listening. We call that podcasting. All the cool kids are doing it. You should figure out how to do it as well. All the links to do it on either Android or iPhone are available off our coaches blog. So if you just go to coaching.gallup.com and click on the resources tab, you'll see a podcast section. All the podcasts we do are there, and you just click on the button. Easy, subscribe there as well. Micah Libran is our host today. She's a workplace consultant here at Gallup. Micah, always great to see you. Welcome to Call the Coach.
Thanks. I feel like it's like a crossover event or like a mashup of my life. I'm so excited to get to be on your other thing that you do, Jim.
Yeah, no, we don't have you for new folks. Micah joins me on Theme Thursday and now during the new Strengths Explorers series that we're doing now. We have other hosts here, but we really wanted to get Cathy on after the Gallup Learning series. Typically, certified coaches just get access to Cathy during our learning series, but I said to Micah, we got to get Cathy on a Call to Coach. And we asked, and she said yes. So Cathy, welcome as well.
Thank you. I said yes enthusiastically. I was so excited. I'm just thrilled. I've been really looking forward to our time together today. So I'm probably a little excited too. We're getting ready to go on vacation tomorrow. So I feel like today is like the first day of vacation, doing this session with you guys and hanging out and talking about coaching. And then we get to pack up our boys and take them down to the Southwest. We're going to go see the Grand Canyon. So we're excited. So thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Micah, why don't we dive in?
Yeah. So folks, I think this is going to be a fantastic hour. As you mentioned, Jim, we don't get to spend near enough time with Cathy, and she really is kind of the coach's coach. The reason that we want to have Cathy here is because of her ability to truly talk about making our strengths coaching absolutely strengths-based. So let me just give us a little bit of a lead in or maybe a crescendo to that, and then you'll get to listen to Cathy and Jim and I have a great conversation about that. We know that people seek out strengths coaching because it's distinctive, it's different. They're looking for something truly transformational. Now, maybe that is an individual just wanting to love the way that they spend their day a little bit more. Maybe it's an organization or leaders within an organization saying we want to increase productivity or enhance collaboration or even just do more of what we do in a better way. But that kind of change that we're looking for with strengths doesn't happen without work. And the work that a coach does, I think, is where the promise of that transformation really comes to life. Strengths coaching is not like conventional developmental coaching. And we know this to be true from a lot of our case studies, from a lot of the times when we say, okay, what is that return on investment around strengths? And you'll probably, if you're listening to this today, I'm sure you've seen these sorts of questions pop up throughout our community of, who can share with me a really great case for strengths, or what do we do? You may have seen something that, in fact, is in a lot of our learning materials, a statement where we talk about managers who focus on the strengths of their people can virtually eliminate active disengagement. I want to help you unpack that for the days that maybe you get a little bit challenged on it, but also keep in mind our whole goal is to say, how does this really happen? What needs to happen in that conversation that really makes this work? It comes from a study where we asked people, where does your manager focus? And they could select, my manager focuses on my strengths, my manager focuses on my weaknesses, or I don't know. And then we kind of put that into a category of being ignored. And in many cases, they indeed said, my manager ignores me. You might guess that when you compare that then to those same respondents' level of engagement, that people who were ignored it was almost impossible impossible for them to be engaged. We look at engaged, not engaged, and actively disengaged to describe a person's experience there with work. When you look at the folks who say my manager focuses on my weakness, they actually outperformed the general population in terms of how engaged they were. And so I think that there is that understanding that any kind of feedback, even if it's critical, even if the bulk of it is about fixing things that are not working, is better than no feedback at all. And people would rather be told what they're not doing well than ignored. But the real story comes when you look at the difference in active disengagement here. People who agree that their manager focuses on their strengths, it's almost impossible for them to be actively disengaged. And active disengagement, remember, is where you see health going down. It's where you see problems happening. It's where you see theft. It's where you see really kind of nasty things that's pretty contagious and toxic. If you could, it'd be better often to pay your actively disengaged employees to stay home instead of exposing them to your customers and your employees. So when we roll that all back up to that claim that managers can virtually eliminate active disengagement by focusing on the strengths of their people, that's a pretty significant claim. And it's true. But I want us to think today, what does it take for somebody to volunteer that? What does it take for you to say, yeah, I really feel like where my manager focuses is on my strengths. Like the bulk of our conversations leave me understanding and putting that into words that, wow, that was just about what was right with me. Think about this, even if you're not a manager, think about this in your coaching. If I were to ask your clients to summarize, what was your coaching about? What would they say? How often would they genuinely look back on that experience and say, it was really about what was right with me, beyond just, we used a tool that said it was about what was right with me? So Cathy is here, I think, to help us through this. And she truly is a master at coaching through strength. A lot of this, in my experience of Cathy, comes from her just real pure mission and vision about why she does what she does. But I think it also comes from the fact that she truly believes in talent and has this insatiable desire to keep learning about talent. She is a shining example of what we often claim, in that we need to understand as coaches that there is infinite opportunities to learn more about times when things work than the limited information that you can get on debriefing what goes wrong. Now, professionally, Cathy partners with both our external Gallup clients in her role where she will advise on the role that talent plays in attracting and hiring the very best. She also serves as a partner internally, serving as a coach mentor to all of our Gallup coaches, helping great coaches be developed and then designing great strengths-based learning interactions. So she really is, not just in my own opinion, but she actually gets paid to be the coach's coach. Cathy, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's been, like I said in my introduction, I've been really looking forward to this. This is just an honor to be with everyone, and thank you for that night, those nice words. I was smiling with my heart and in my face. So thank you so much. I believe it. It's true. I like to joke that I was raised by a natural maximizer because my mom, she leads with it, and there's 4 of us in our family. And because someone was teasing me one day about how long I've been at Gallup, and oh, you're maximizer, which is number 2. But they were saying, oh, it's because you've been at Gallup for so long. And I said, well, let me tell you, my mom leads with it. So I know what it feels like, and she doesn't work at Gallup. So I know what it feels like to be raised through that lens of, you're different. That's great. You're different than your brothers. That's great. What are you good at? What do you want to try? What do you want to do more of? Here, let's go do it. And, as you look at the 4 of us, we all chose different paths. But it's really about our strengths, isn't it? So I have a brother who's an architect, and when he was in 8th grade, his Christmas present was a draftsman table. Wow. They didn't know he was going to be an architect at that time. What my mom knew is that he loved to draw, and that he loved to kind of have his own space. And he had 3 younger siblings who loved to get into his stuff. So draftsman table, and he still uses that draftsman table in his home to this day. It was his very first one. And I have a brother who's a musician. I have another brother who's he's a construction engineer and a manager. So anyway, different things. And here I am, strengths coach. So natural maximizer, love it. So thank you.
Yeah, that's super cool, and it makes me want to just spend the whole hour asking you more about that. But can you tell us, before we dive too far in,
Sure.
What are your top 5?
Sure. Individualization, maximizer, arranger, input, relator. But I think it goes beyond that. I'm ready to say that, didn't you?
Go ahead.
Because
Keep going.
that's just the story. I mean, that's just like the outline. When I first saw my top 5, I remember thinking, oh yeah, I mean, that's me. That describes me. But then I remember vividly thinking, where's my doer? Oh, okay. High achiever 6, high responsibility 7, developers in there, learners in there, connectedness belief. But you get that full sense of the person. Even I had that experience myself, and I still remember it to this day. Oh gosh, my first StrengthsFinder was dated 1999, actually. So I still remember that though, because it was such a powerful piece. So I think as coaches, I'm just sharing that with you because I think it's important for us to bring that sometimes to our coaches too.
What's a
The people that we're working
what's a
with,
better
yeah.
question than what are your top 5? How would you phrase it?
What do you lead with?
Mm.
I think that gives you can, that way the person can choose, can't they? I choose my top 12 technically of the strengths that I lead with that I feel like are mine. But I think what do you lead with is probably a good one. What are your core strengths? As you read your report, which ones really resonated with you? That keeps it right away. You put that locus of control back in your client's hands. You're not, as a coach, deciding for them. They're deciding for themselves. It's their assessment. They get to tell us who they are and their story. Yeah.
Cathy, what are you excited about around this topic? What do you want to make sure that we discuss?
Well, I think when I was thinking about our time together, I was thinking, let's remember a few things just as coaches. What an honor and a privilege we've been given to be in this space with people. I really mean that. This is an honor and a privilege. And to be in that moment with that person and to partner alongside them and to be, Jackie, I don't know if some of you might have seen the learning series, but she kind of talked about the guide, being a guide on this person's journey. And I've always thought about myself that way too. I think thinking about like your visualization as a coach, sometimes I like to be outside and I like to be in nature. And so sometimes I might visualize that you and I, my client and I are walking shoulder to shoulder down kind of a path. It's a forest path. So there's trees and there's sunlight coming through the leaves, and we're really enjoying ourselves. It's warm. Unlike today, I'm looking out at a buried snowbank, but it's warm and the birds are singing and we're walking along and we are enjoying ourselves. That's my role as a coach, is to be alongside of you, to be shoulder to shoulder. What's interesting though, is you think about if you do some hiking, sometimes the trail narrows. So sometimes your client should go in front of you and you follow. And then sometimes the trail widens out again. So now you're shoulder to shoulder. And then sometimes your client might say, oh, here, you go in front. Okay, so now I'll go in front. But guess what? They get to always choose. So then we come back shoulder to shoulder. So I'm excited to think about us as coaches, to think about how do you partner best with your clients. I'm excited to think about and to talk about our mission and purpose, who you are as an individual, who you are as a coach, what you bring to the table, and how do you leverage your own talents in this wonderful role that we have, this honor and this privilege. I'm excited to think about too that this is I think coaching is, how do we serve our client? It's very much a service mindset sometimes. How do we best serve this person? So in order to do that, how do we show up to be our authentic self? And then I think about too, how do we honor the person we're working with? All people have value. All strengths have value. And as a strengths coach, how do you help that person? I think it's not necessarily find their value. I think it might be rediscover their value. I think it might be remind them and appreciate it. This might be the first time, and they might have had great parents, they might have had great bosses, but this might be the first time in a coaching session with you that the emphasis is really on, as Micah said earlier, what's right about you, rather than the majority of the time being spent, okay, yeah, that's great, but now go figure out, now we have to go fix this. You have that opportunity with your clients to have the majority of the time focused in on what's right about that person and have them walk away remembering their power and how there's unlimited potential. operate from strength. So those are a few things. I'm sure we'll get into more. You know what else I was thinking about, Micah, is that it'll be great for the chat room to get rolling and that we can answer questions live too from coaches. As you said, it's such an honor and privilege. When I think about my clients, I'm not just thinking about the Gallup clients. I also think about all the coaches that I coach. You're my clients too. So I love the coach conversation. So I was hoping to have a lot of interactive dialogue too.
There you go, chat room. Bring it on.
Bring it on.
Jim and I will watch that chat room so that Cathy can really just stay kind of in her zone. But we're there. And so feel free to send those questions. Cathy, what you're describing, I already can sense is very different than a conventional approach to coaching. But I think I'm going to put a stake in the ground and say that it's also very different than how a lot of even strengths coaches tend to have those interactions. You do seem like you are genuinely rooted in this belief that there's a lot to learn and a lot to do within focusing on people's strengths. What kind of clues do you get from people that you're getting it right? I'm going to stack a question here so that I can clarify that. But what do you notice being different about a client when you have really tapped into conversations about their strengths?
Oh gosh, the energy shifts. The energy changes immediately. It's almost like if you had a thermometer in the room, you would feel. I mean, the energy just shifts. I think sometimes I feel like, and what I mean by that is in a positive way. Sometimes I feel like people get a little calmer. Sometimes I feel like people get a little bit more, you hear a lot of kind of the deep breath, and we'll call it out together. I might say, what are you feeling right now? What happened there just now? Because I don't know, but I can feel something has shifted for the person. I think as a coach, you can go more deeply, more quickly with that person, as long as they're okay with that. Mm-hmm. But you're starting from a place of authenticity. This is who that person is. And so it's great to start there and to celebrate that. And if you think about too, if you think about the ICF core competencies, and you think about establishing trust and rapport and confidentiality, you think about your coaching presence, you think about creating awareness with that person, you think about some of those powerful questions that can be rooted in maybe some of the things that you've learned about them through their strengths. You're really able to serve your clients, I think, more fully and more deeply. When you kind of keep it focused there. So I think that people too, how they react differently too, when you start from a place and you continue from a place of acceptance rather than judgment, maybe that's where the energy shifts, because now you don't have to try to be somebody you're not. You can kind of quiet the voices maybe that you've heard over the years of people who have said, gosh, why is that driving? Why do you do it like that? Or why is that happening? Well, because it's who I am. Maybe you just don't know. You just don't understand. Sometimes I think about, I'm a mom. We have 3 kids, and so our kids are a little bit older. But Micah, your kids are a little bit younger. So I'm going to think about that with you. If you think about Claire and Simon, you think about your kids. And, when babies are little, what do they do when they don't understand something? They go crawl right over to it, and then they go grab it, and then they go put it in their mouth, and they have to slobber on it, and they have to touch it, and they have to feel it. When an adult doesn't understand something, do we go crawl right over to it and examine it and want to explore it and learn about it? No, sometimes not. Sometimes we ignore it. Sometimes we shift away from it. Sometimes we assume and we kind of create a little story in our head about it based off of our own, whatever's coming to us, our own kind of stories and experiences. But I think when I think about strengths, I think about, wouldn't it be great if we all go and embrace that strength? Wouldn't it be great if we all kind of go up to it with that childlike innocence and wonder and that understanding that says, this is interesting. Let me hear more about that. Let me talk more about that. Now, I'm not saying go slobber on your clients, but I am saying, but I am saying, explore that with them. It's okay to have a little fun with it, but it's okay to come at it, I think, from that position of, I don't know anything about you that you don't know about yourself. So let's talk about it. Let's explore this together.
Cathy, before we go too much farther, I'm going to have you drop your mic down just a smidge for me. Not too far. There we go. Perfect. We're picking up a little bump on that. We did get a question from David out in the chat room. He says, I think establishing trust early in the coaching relationship is important. How do you do that authentically in such a short time period? Are there some things that you do consistently or you like to do that may help speed that up? You
Yeah,
mentioned a few, I think, which is immediately figuring out what is right. Like you said, you asked that question on, hey, what's going right? Right. Which is by the way, as a manager, is a question I need to steal and start every quick connect conversation with. Tell me what's going right in your world right now, as opposed to what's wrong. But what else? How else do you do that?
It starts before you get on the phone. A lot of my calls are or face to face with a person. So if I'm going to be doing something on the phone or in person, it starts before that. You're getting into your coaching presence, and you're getting into that place of connection with that person before they've even got on the phone. And what does that mean? That means that you yourself as a coach, remind yourself why you're there, and kind of block out, kind of manage yourself. I have a coaching friend who says, you know what gets in your way, so manage yourself. So I think you do that first, but then it starts from that very first breath. That very first, you're dialing the phone, that first breath. It's your presence and it's your tone and it's your being ready to go wherever that person needs to go. And guess what? I'm smiling right now. You can hear it in my voice. If you didn't see a picture of me right now, you would still hear the smile in my voice. So be welcoming. I call it kind of that, it's like that hostess, being a good hostess. When someone comes to your home, what do you do? Do you open the door and just kind of from the kitchen yell, hey, come on in? Yeah, the drinks are on the table. No, you go right to the door and you welcome them with open arms and you're glad you're there. It's the same tone to take when you're starting your coaching session. Now, what do you say? We would say that your introduction should be pretty short. I mean, it's 30 seconds or a little less, but not too much more, because it's really all about getting started on the right foot with that client. So I think there's establishing, what is a quick way for you to establish your credibility and also to establish maybe your compassion, and kind of why you're there. So sometimes I might say, I just do a quick introduction. It kind of depends on why we're having the coaching session, doesn't it? So I might say, if I'm doing some master coaching, some coach the coach, I give a little quick thing about I work here at Gallup, and I do a lot of work with coaches and master coaching program. And that's why you and I get to talk today. But I also want you to know me as a person. So then I might throw just a quick little something. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. It just kind of depends on maybe their intake form and what I've learned about the person ahead of time. But I think it's, what can you say quickly, that establishes your credibility, but also that, your mission and purpose of kind of why you're there. So I might also, it depends on what I know about them, like I said, from their intake form. If there's something that I feel like, I'm a relator. So if there's something I feel like there might be, we have in common or something, I don't know. Sometimes it's nice to even just, people might say, how are you? And guess what? Listen and answer. Sometimes that can be just kind of a throwaway phrase, but how are you? And really waiting for that other person to answer and not kind of talk over each other, is really important, I think. So those are just, I think, a few of the quick things, that you might say. I think it's anything that you can, but just remember, you want them to start talking sooner rather than later. I think that's how you kind of establish it. And I do think sometimes, I don't want to ever assume anything, but if when I see their report, my client's report, I might be prepared. I not might be. I probably am prepared to tailor my style a little bit based off of what I think might be there. Um, but you have to be careful with that because, you never want to assume anything. But sometimes that might mean if I see someone who's got an awful lot of executing or a lot of thought process, I might be ready to kind of get right to to their agenda and their coaching agreement and those types of things a little sooner rather than later. Or if I see someone who's really heavy in a lot of relationship, well, then I might realize that maybe they want to, talk a little bit more. So I think it gives you some clues maybe of how you might start or how it might go in the beginning, but you never want to assume. So hopefully that helps in terms of how to start off that introduction.
Sure. I think I've heard you say a couple times that assuming gets in our way. Um,
That might be a theme.
right. But we have this amazing amount of knowledge already. They've told us 176 times about themselves. So, how do you balance what you can glean out of their report and who you want to be to remain present with them?
Yeah. I think that it's being aware of how those patterns might show up. And then it's getting back to maybe that childlike curiosity about, who are you? Tell me your story. Love to hear about how these work for you. How do these strengths work for you? How do you use them in your role? Tell me about, and those are some of after your introduction. As we know, there's a flow to a coaching session. So that the first kind of step is that preparation. The second step is kind of that establishing the trust and the rapport pretty quickly. But getting them to start talking about themselves and asking some questions about, it depends on what kind of a session this is. If this is a first session that they, the first time that you've talked to them, or if these are some sessions that, multiple sessions you've been building on. But I still think kind of just getting a sense of, what they want to talk about during the session. But as you're unpacking their strengths, really just being curious and understanding and wanting to hear, how do they use these? How do these work for them? What do they like about it? What kind of gets in their way? I think is really important. And having a way to remember that, or maybe after your sessions, kind of collect those stories, especially if you're a little, maybe a newer coach. Because I think I get asked a lot, well, how do you know all that? I haven't been coaching for 28 years or, 25 years, or that's just stuff that's going to have to come. I think there are little things that you can do as a coach to try to build your repertoire maybe a little bit more quickly. And you know yourself best. Some folks want to write it down afterwards, or some folks have little ways of kind of storing some of that. But I think that, storing some of those stories as a coach, having a way to do that, because then in later coaching sessions, not only with that person, but with other people, then you might be able to, in a general way, kind of talk about how a strength might show up, and then, kind of bounce it off that person and say, but how does it work for you? And be able to collect their stories that way.
Is it possible to go down this whole road and still leave somebody feeling like you talked about what was wrong with them? Cathy, do you think you can
Sure.
use CliftonStrengths and not have them walk away feeling like it was about their strengths?
Sure. You bet. You know what I've heard, and I've been guilty of it too. So guess what? Try to learn from my mistakes, everyone. But sometimes our strengths, as we know, they're intense. There are talents. They pop up. They show up, and if we're not managing them, they can manage us. And if we're not intentional, and if we don't have a good idea of kind of how they show up and how we want them to show up and how to manage them, they'll manage us.
Mhm.
So you can have a conversation when you're talking about strengths, when you're really talking about the flip side of a person's talents and how it's gotten in their way, or how, if you're talking about, kind of interpersonal dynamics with other people, rather than as a coach kind of circling it back to, here's what's right about this, or what sometimes after a person, here's an example of that. Like, I might be having a conversation with someone, and we're having a conversation about, how do I use my strengths in the situation? And it's kind of interpersonal dynamics. People are kind of getting on each other's nerves, either work partners, or maybe it's a manager who's uh, having maybe some performance issues with another person. And so you kind of collect their story, you kind of get a sense for the context of the situation. Um, and what can happen is that context can continue to go on and on and on. And as a coach, you want to be aware of kind of, how long have we been talking about this issue and the problem, and how is it being kind of couched in their frame of reference. And sometimes it can really be about what's wrong with the strength, how much the strength has been bugging this person, or how much, how this person's showing up is getting on this person's nerves, or, causing some issues in their performance, or whatever it may be. And you might go 40 minutes thinking you're talking about strengths when you've really been talking about how this is not really showing up the way you want it to. So you kind of, as a coach, you want to flip that. You want to be aware of it can happen. And so sometimes you have to be bold, and you have to kind of say, we've been talking for about the last 20 minutes about the issue. Now let's spend purposeful time. Let's spend the next 20 minutes to think about, well, what can you do with this? Or sometimes I might just pop out and say, what's up? I do this sometimes with managers quite a bit, but I might say, what's the person do well? And their silence. And you be okay with the silence. And sometimes you have to say that question again. What do they do well? And you have to be okay with the silence. Because what happens, you ask that question and things start to shift. But if you don't ask that question, Now you've just gone down the path of thinking we're talking about strengths, when in reality, you've just been talking about kind of the flip side. So our strengths can be intense. And if we don't understand them, again, as adults, sometimes we have a tendency to either ignore it or make fun of it or kind of look away from it, not want to embrace it. But kind of going into it with that sense of there's got to be something this person does well, got to be something this person does right. There's got to be something you can appreciate about this person, even in this moment of difficulty. So, how do you leverage that? As a coach, being purposeful with that.
A moment of probably therapy right here, but I've got high positivity. And sometimes I know that comes across as just being naive. How do you maintain credibility with people while you're trying to flip them from talking about what's wrong to being able to talk about what's right? How does that not come across as just, yeah, but I want to make you happy?
Yeah. You want to give it space. I mean, you do want to allow that person to fill in the context. You don't want to do that too quickly, because then you're not really understanding. You're not really hearing the full picture. But I think so you do want to spend some time establishing that reality, but you also want to think about what's the aspiration? Why are we even having this conversation? Because I'm assuming positive intent. So I'm assuming that they want to be constructive. I'm assuming that they want to do something positive as a result of this conversation, whether it be like that interpersonal dynamic or a manager who's coaching someone, or whatever the circumstance might be. I'm assuming that we need to talk about something that's going to be constructive so that they can walk away from our session, then putting that into practice and into play with that person and trying it and seeing how it goes, and seeing if it doesn't shift the conversation, and seeing if it doesn't maybe shift your behavior and your expectation of that person. And when that might shift it, then that might change it. So I think it is, you don't want to jump too quick, Micah, to be fair. But I think it's also giving credence and respect to the fact of this person's got to do something well. What do they do well? And it's interesting, whenever that's happened, and I don't mean to make these broad sweeping statements, but I'm going to right now, because whenever that's happened, it works. I'm not exaggerating. It works. I'm particularly thinking of specific management situations where there's been some pretty challenging situations these managers are working through with folks, and they're working through them with me as their coach. But what happens, I think, is when you start to view it, when you flip the story and you start to view that person now through the lens of, oh, what is that? Let's talk about it from the other side. So we've been talking about how that responsibility or how that achiever, how that strategic or whatever, we can name any of them, of how it's been bugging you. But now let's turn it around. How could they use it? How could you use it? How could you position them and use it how could you help this person use it to their advantage? How do you help them position it so that you, first of all, kind of change your expectation, but then how do you help them maybe as their manager, as the person who's working with them, maybe you just need to ask a few questions. A what or a how question will sure go a long way. Then here, let me tell you all about this. Does that help?
It totally does. I'm interested in that last thing you said. And sometimes our coaches are doing, we are even as Gallup coaches doing more feedback where you
Yeah.
do feel that weight of needing to educate them a little bit around what is strengths. How do you balance between educating and coaching, or maybe even consulting and coaching? And how do you
Yes.
make sure that you're getting that right for the client?
That is such a great question, because we have to do it. We have assessments, we have instruments, and I think as a coach, you want to be really careful and clear in your own mind. The analogy I use is you've got these hats. You're going to wear a hat. You're going to wear your coaching hat, or maybe you're going to wear your consulting hat. And so in the middle of a session, and in a coaching session, a Gallup, strengths coaching session, you have to be ready to put either one of those hats on. Because you're right, Micah, sometimes you need to put your consulting hat on. Sometimes it's time in that what's going to serve your client best because of what they've shared with you, what they want to talk about is, let's just talk about this. So let's talk about maybe what I think that, my deliberative is showing up like this, but Cathy, what have you heard? What have you seen? How does it show up for other people? as a coach, you want to be cueing in and kind of clearing, kind of having your ears tuned to those situations where they're asking a specific question. And guess what? I can't answer a specific question with, well, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Is that serving your client? No. They asked me specifically, Cathy, tell me about what you've heard about, deliberative. How does it work? So in that moment, I think you want to establish that coaching agreement again to be clearer with that person. Again, ICF core competency, you want to always be honoring that coaching agreement. So in that moment in time, just saying, so I'm hearing you ask, I'm hearing you say you want to dig into deliberative a little bit more. Is it okay if we, if I kind of talk about it a little bit? Or what would you like me to talk about when you're asking me about deliberative? And they get to tell you, they get to give you the choice. Because then again, if you're going to shift into more consulting mode, then as a coach, I'm going to put that hat on. So I'm going to put my consulting hat on, maybe talk about it a little bit. Again, not too much, but I'm going to give them enough, as much as I can to try to help. Then I'm going to put my coaching hat right back on and I'm going to ask them a coaching question. And I'm going to say, so what seemed to resonate with you about that? And then then now we're back into coaching again. But I think it's very true that in Gallup coaching, sometimes, and whether some of you might be engagement coaches, kind of using customer engagement data or using strengths data. I mean, there's different assessments and tools. So what I've always been trained and taught, and what I try to teach as well, is if you are talking about that assessment or if you've been asked a specific question, have that coaching agreement with your client, ask if that's what they want us to talk about, put your consulting hat on, answer the question, and then be ready to put your coaching hat right back on and ask a question about how it landed for them, what resonates, what it means to them, what's important about that to them, so that they get to then kind of, again, we're shoulder to shoulder. Remember, we're kind of walking down that path. They get to decide, where we're going again.
Awesome. So you get to see a lot of coaching. You get to experience a lot and watch a lot of this. What do you think about looking for in terms of how could we check ourselves? So are there things or patterns that you notice that lead to those really great experiences where people walk away having that, wow, we really did talk about my strengths? And if so, what are those?
I think there's some questions that we can ask ourselves as coaches, maybe after a session, maybe even sometimes before a session, to kind of get in that right mental state and mindset. But I think one of the questions is, how true are you as a coach to your talents during that session? I have a coaching client that I work with, and he I'm going to share with you kind of one of his strategies, because he was thinking about, how do I re-engage my mission and purpose? He's an established coach. He's coached for a long time. And one of the things he was thinking about is, how does he use strengths to help him to re-engage and kind of reestablish and kind of revigorate his own personal mission and purpose? And so one of the things he talked about was, and he's going to try it in 3 ways. He's going to try it either after every session, he's going to try it at the end of the day, or he's going to try it at the end of the week. And he said he was going to play around with it and experiment it, and then get back to me and let me know what worked best for him. But what he's going to do is he's going to, at the end of a session, he's going to ask himself 2 questions. What strength did I lead with in that session? And then what strength was fed in that session? And those can oftentimes be very different answers. So what did you leverage or what did you lead with? Helps you to kind of think tactical and practical. I was using this actual strength here in this moment with this person, and I can kind of see some outcome. But then what was fed, I think, gets you back to that mission and purpose. And I think it gets you back to that idea about how true are you to your own talents as a coach? Because as we know, authenticity is so important. And what might work for you, Micah, is not going to work for me necessarily, or Jim, or anybody else. So you have to really know yourself. But I think asking yourself those questions and kind of reflecting on in that moment, like he said, either daily or at the end of at the end of the session, at the end of the day, or at the end of the week, it's going to give him kind of that little booster shot of maybe mission and purpose. But it's going to help him to remember, and something we can all try. And I've actually been trying it too. Like, what strength was fed during that session that gets you grounded again to your mission purpose? So there's one. I think too, just this idea of the balance of, did you spend more time, again, talking about what's right versus what's wrong? and being honest with yourself, kind of reflecting back and thinking, okay, so maybe you're going to do it a little different next time. If you spend a little bit much, too much time on the one end of too much of the diagnosis of the problem and kind of thinking about where we're at, and rather than thinking about the aspiration of where that person wants to go. And then what role did weakness play? Because I think, as we know, sometimes we get that pushback of, oh, Gallup just ignores weakness. No, we don't. We all have them. We all have things that can possibly get in our way of our performance or relationships at work or at home. So just what role did it play, though, in your coaching? Was it the right role? Because sometimes that's one of the things that the client needs to talk about. That's what they want to talk about. That's what they established a coaching agreement on. Then great. Then we embrace it. But just what role did it play? Did it play the right role? I think too, gosh, it's such an honor and privilege. You start with momentum and you end with momentum. You start with that idea of being a great host, and you're so glad that they're there, and you're excited to learn about them, and you value them as a person. And then you end on that too. It's, again, this could be the first time that they've ever had that opportunity. So honor them. Help to affirm them, help to remind them, giving a little bit of recognition and praise is just fine. Don Clifton famously always asks, I was in one of his classes years ago, and he looked out at the room and he just said, raise your hand if you've ever gotten too much praise. No. I don't know if anybody raised their hand. So as a coach, guess what? You get that opportunity to end your session with some momentum, with some idea of, you've done some hard work today. You've had some great opportunity here. It sounds like you've had some ahas. I can't wait to hear more and see how it worked. I was talking about my coaching friend who's got that strategy he's going to try either at the end of the session, daily or weekly. And I ended our session saying that I can't wait to hear how this works for you. I can't wait to hear which one is best for you. I think that's great. So start with momentum, end with momentum. And I think too, thinking about how did we help them work through some feelings of maybe themes that they didn't have, or there's that idea about what do we love, what drives us crazy, what do we envy. So how do we help them work through that? Did they have some self-limiting beliefs? Did they have some feelings of less than? Were we able to, maybe by reminding them of a successful time that they've used this, or reminding them of a successful strategy in their life that they've, that's a really powerful way actually to coach, is sometimes to ask a person, if they're thinking about it, a problem that they're facing, or a situation, an obstacle, have they ever faced it before? Names and faces might change, but circumstances have a funny little way of popping their heads up again. So, ask them, have you ever seen that before? Okay. What'd you do there? Okay. Well, did it work? Were you successful? Okay. So how might you use what you learned there in this situation? They get to make the connection for themselves. It may not be perfect. It may not be apples to apples. Probably isn't. But guess what? When you start to focus on how they did it well, or how they worked through it the first time, or when they faced it the first time, something changes in the person's brain. Something starts to open up. They start to feel resilient again. They start to believe in themselves again. They start to remember, oh yeah, I've done this before. I can do it again. It may not work out the same way, but at least this is the strategy, the strengths-based strategy that I tried. I'll go do it again. And I think finally, maybe a final little check or question to ask is, did you talk about excellence? Did you talk about that idea of, what did you do well? What do you do better than some? When do you feel you're at your most authentic and you're real? Our talents have yearnings too. And this pops up every once in a while in the strangest ways, like in my life, not just in Gallup or in coaching, but people find themselves in situations usually of what they're doing well, and they want to go do it again. So did you help them think about that? Did you help them remember those times of excellence, of when they really shone, when they really felt in flow? So those are some of the ways. What about you?
Kathy,
What do you think, Micah?
well, I'm just thinking that last one of did you talk about excellence really pushes a lot of people in different spaces. I found there was a time in my life where I was doing a lot of work in higher ed, and I found that especially there, working with younger students who were high achievers, that it was a I don't want to say a barrier, but it was definitely a common hurdle sometimes for them to really want to work on things they already did well because they were so good at working on and fixing things that they didn't do well. And for many of them, they'd grown up with a very specific expectation right in front of them, whether it was a rubric or a syllabus or a specific challenge that they just had to finish, and then they could be great at it. Well, it felt a little bit ambiguous. It felt a little bit like cloudy to be able to say, here's your strengths and you can get better at them.
Mhm.
And so I love that last question that you have around, did you talk about excellence? Because sometimes for people, that means you might do it through recognition. You might do it through, raising the bar. But that one just really resonated with me as being that opportunity to say, yes, you do this well. And what would your life be like if you did it better?
And did more of it. And we're more intentional because that's what happens. These things might come out, and in that coaching session, until it might be just natural, right? It's just kind of like breathing. Some of these things are coming out for that person, but until they're in that coaching session where you have that opportunity to hold up the mirror and say, "Oh, that wasn't just that wasn't just normal. That was great. You did that really well." How many times in coaching have you all experienced sometimes when the person kind of says, "Oh, I thought everybody did that." Guess what? They don't. They don't think like that. They don't act like that. They're not going to react in the same way because they're so uniquely different. And you as a coach have that honor and privilege. You get to, as I said, kind of hold up that mirror or help them to see what you're seeing. And that's excellence. Everybody's doing something well. They can do it better. You're right, Micah. So how do you do it? And so then when you're intentional, that's what gets so exciting about it, you guys, because then the person gets some energy around it. And they're like, "Oh, I already do this well. I want to be more intentional about that next time." Then they're going to get to success more quickly. Or when they face an obstacle, what can happen too, you guys, is that, emotions can kind of start to block us a little bit. So we can kind of get wrapped up in this emotion of whatever the emotion could be, anxiety or nervousness or fear or uncertainty, or you don't believe in yourself, whatever it might be. And so when you remember excellence, guess what? You're still going to feel the emotion, but you can work through it a little bit more quickly and you can get to the other side of it. The emotion doesn't have to hold you back. You're going to work through it more quickly. Then you're going to get onto the other side with that successful strategy.
I love that. Work through it, use it to accelerate.
For sure.
Kathy, we're sort of coming to a close of our time with you. What is it that you
We
wish?
are. Gosh,
Can you believe it?
where did the
Right?
time go?
Goes super fast.
Can we do another hour?
Sure, why not? We could if you didn't have this snazzy vacation to get
I know,
to.
right? Oh.
I have been thinking this entire time that you are the reason everybody needs a coach, and you have just illustrated can you imagine having somebody like Kathy in your corner and how that would change the world if everybody had that? Kathy, my question for you is, what do you hope every coach knows?
Gosh, that's broad. Just be honest. I was
Mhm.
thinking knows about what? Knows about themselves, knows about coaching, knows about strengths, knows about the gift that you've been given to be in this role. Listen to all
Maybe
those
that's it.
questions. Let's just look at all of those. How about it? Um, how about knows about yourself? What do I hope you know? That you do something well as a coach, that you've been called to this for a reason. So embrace it. Be pretty clear about what your mission and purpose is. When you need to get reinvigorated or get a booster shot of it, find a way to do it. Because this is, like you said, Micah, it's such impactful work. It's positive work. It's powerful work. What do you need to know about your clients? Um, you don't know their story. So be excited to learn. Honor them as that individual. Ask some great questions that gets them to feel comfortable in sharing their story with you. And then feel comfortable and confident in your own ability to ask some powerful questions that help them to go a little deeper to create that awareness, which will take them to where they need to go. But don't feel like as a coach that you need to assume that that you need to feel like you need to walk into every session knowing everything about all 34 and everything about everything you just learned in ASC. And oh my gosh, I haven't unpacked the book and I'm not sure. And it's okay. It's okay. What do you need to know? How do you learn more? How do you collect those stories? What do you need to what do I hope that people remember about strengths coaching? Is that you wear two hats. Mike, I'm glad you brought that up about the consulting and the coaching. And some sessions, guess what? You might wear one hat a lot longer than you wear the other hat, and that's just fine. And then other sessions, you might wear the other hat. Okay. If that's what your client needs, then that's the hat you wear because you're here to serve them. I would also say that, and I'm going to sound like an old dog here, but I've been at Gallup a long time and I've been coaching a long time. There is unlimited potential in coaching from strengths. Period. It's unlimited what people can achieve when they just focus on that idea of here's what I do well. How can I be more intentional? It is impactful. I think too that you want to remember, how do I measure my performance? And then how do I collect some of these stories and check back with people so that you can have a little bit of numbers and a little bit of kind of quantifiable data to back you up a little bit. Some success stories, some case studies I think are important. Those are a few. There's probably more.
That's great. I asked a really broad question, and I thought I could keep going. I could end this sentence. Nope. I want her to take it where she's going. So thank you. Thanks for taking that. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. You could take it 1,000 places. That's why I asked it that way, because all of them were good. No, that's excellent. Jim, what else do we need to get from Cathy today?
Chris was looking for a little, maybe an additional definition. He said, if time permits, what's Cathy's opening calming statement to get a coachee focused on growth and on their journey in a coaching session? So, Cathy, I remember you saying a few things like it kind of depends and you got to kind of read your client and some of those, but do you have kind of some standard go-tos?
I do.
Okay. Yeah. Can you mention a few?
Yeah, sure. I can just do hi, I'm Cathy. Hi, I'm Cathy DeWeese. It's great to talk with you. Is this still a good time for your session? Great. How are you today? How's it going? Pause, pause, pause. Let them talk, let them talk, let them talk. Really listen. You're going to hear a lot when you ask that, and don't just rush into the next thing. Well, how about if I introduce myself just a little bit here before we get started? I'd love to get to know you too and have you introduce yourself to me. And then we can kind of jump in and find out how you'd like us to spend your time today. How's that sound? Okay. So then I might say, so I've been Gallup, it depends on the context. Anyway, I might say, so I've been at Gallup for 28 years and I'm a strengths coach, and I work a lot with our clients like you, folks who attend our different programs. And then I also work internally. I'm a coach for our Gallup coaches. So that's why you get to talk to me today. And then I'll say, gosh, I really want to get to know you. So what's important for me to know about you today? And then you listen. And you might want to write down a couple of things that they said. By the way, speaking of writing, there's lots of schools of thought on that. I write a couple of important things that they might say in my introduction. I always write the coaching agreement, what their topic is, what they want us to talk about. And then I probably don't write a whole lot. And then after I'm done with my session is probably when I write and fill in a few more of my notes. There are other schools of thought where people say don't write at all. I feel an ownership to it, high responsibility. I just feel an ownership that I need to do that. It also helps to kind of keep the call anchored. So anyway, that's an aside. The other thing I like to say, because I firmly believe it, is I'm here for you. This is your coaching session. I'm excited to talk about the things that are going to be most important for you. I might reference, some folks need a few guardrails. So I might say something like, we could talk about goals. We could talk about workplace challenges. We could talk about your strengths. We could talk about some of the things that you'd mentioned on your intake form. But I'm here for you. This is your time. So how would you like us to spend your time?
Cathy, I think one of the things that gets underrated in this, and I've learned this through doing all these webcasts, is that practicing those statements, I think, is important in the conversation of, it shouldn't be the first time you've said it as you're dealing with people. While those sound welcoming and inviting, they are that way because you're comfortable saying them. And I think if you're new to this or you're working on it, I think it's really important to have those kind of statements thought through. Again, this shouldn't be the first time you've been thinking about them and practicing them some. Mm-hmm. You've done this tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 times in your career. And so those statements kind of roll like they are part of you. They are who you are, and they sound genuine. Well, one, because they are, but two, because you said them a lot. right? And you say them in a way that is inviting, and you're just able to do that. So I think I have learned in this process, I've encouraged coaches to practice some of those, have some go-to statements, right? Don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. And if it means you practice in front of a mirror, then do it. If that means you get on the phone with some best friend or your spouse or your mom, or just say, hey, I just need to practice this. I think you do it. I think you practice it with yourself, and I think you practice it out loud with a few people. Trusted folks. Maybe you get your dog on the couch and you go and talk to your dog. I don't really care, but I think practicing, my dog's a great listener. Lulu will listen. She'll pick her little ears up and she'll give you some feedback. And then you want to ask the person, you do want to ask a real life human who could give you some feedback though. And you do want to ask them, how did that sound? Do you feel like that, was it authentic? Here's some great questions. Is it authentic? Did it tell you what was important? Did it make you feel, to your point, did it make you feel welcomed and invited? Do you want to talk to me? Because that's really what it is, isn't it? You want to be inviting, and you want that other person to feel that, hey, I want to talk to you.
And
So I think you're right.
Going back to your
sorry.
first point, Cathy, that how true to your own talents were you as a coach? I don't want people to go away and just replay you and practice, how can I be more like Cathy, right? Yours is so good because it's how you talk to me in the hallway, right? It's so true to who you are from the very beginning, and then you practice it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that. Because guess what? Everybody's different. So whatever you want, whatever that needs to be, to your point, let it ring true to your heart. Let it be authentic to who you are. Let it be your introduction, because then the tone and the quality and the authenticity comes across. That's exactly right.
I get the opportunity to interview a lot of technical folks who come in to get jobs here at Gallup for technology. And I have an interview that I kind of put them through, and it's well scripted out questions that I don't read off of, but I've done so many times that I can say them in a way, or even work them in different order, but I get it all done because I'm very, very familiar with my material. And again, the temptation can be to script that and then to sound too scripted, or no, they were saying something and you just had to move on to the next question. Like, you can't, like, that's definitely not where you want to be. Micah, if you go back and listen to this interview, Micah was very, very careful during the entire thing to never speak too quickly. Like, she kind of practiced that in this context. It would have been a temptation for me. Cathy, at one point you were saying some things and then you paused. And as an interviewer and as a coach, you want to jump in, like you want to fill that space. And Micah did such a great job of just letting that space live for a while. And man, that is super uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I think you just have to be comfortable with space. It's an area I am still working on. I still need to leave those spaces out there and just let them be. I am so quick because I'm in interview mode. And sometimes when you're in coaching or you're in interview mode, you're just trying to get them speaking. And I think I heard you say today, let that space be real, right? Let it live out there for a while and not feel like you have to fill that empty space up. So some
You're
great
serving
stuff.
your client best.
Yeah.
Typically that means that's really what you need to give them. It's a gift. It's a gift for yourself too, really. But if you think about your coaching presence, you think about authenticity, you think about your creating awareness, you think about direct communication. It's really important to let that space, to let that silence have its place. And I know we're kind of coming up against the time, but I couldn't agree more.
We'll go over just a smidge. I think
Okay.
also sometimes the most authentic moments are the second time it's said. So you ask a question, someone responds with an answer, and you don't just move on to the next question, but you allow that space to live. And then they say it again. We do this. Everybody does this. In that second time, oftentimes can be more genuine and authentic and to the point, or bring those things out. So don't be, I guess what I'm saying, don't be like me. Be like Cathy and actually give spaces.
I've had to learn that. It is a hard thing. I've had to learn it. Do I always do it right? No, sure don't. But I try to be really conscious of it. And you know why, you guys? It's because when it's happened, I really have gotten feedback from my clients that was really important to them. So I'm not doing it because of me. I'm doing it because it's right for them. But the feedback I've gotten from them has been, that was really important. So thank you.
Good points indeed. We are out of time. Micah, do you want to wrap it for us?
Oh, woo, that's challenging. One thing I would say to wrap is right on that note, Cathy, of it, when you, I'm trying to wrap and be succinct. This is a different part than the rest of their day. And if you're a coach, especially if you're a professional coach, it's the same stuff all day, right? You are coaching all day long, but chances are for the people that you're coaching, this is unlike anything else they've done all day. Especially when we're coaching within organizations or managers, they're probably going in that kind of cadence where silence isn't okay and where it is just all about the execution bit all day long. So you're already going to be different. And as long as you've established that out loud, right? Talking about that coaching contract, making it overt, allowing that to be a different experience than they've ever had in any kind of coaching and a different experience than they're going to have in the rest of their day. It's okay. And it works to be there. Cathy, thank you so much for illustrating today, like I said, why we believe that everybody needs a coach. I think we have so much to learn. There's a moment in the middle of this interview that I think I wish I could capture in written form, but I can't. It's when you talk about something changes, when you force people to really think about, did somebody do something right? And that is the point of positive psychology that this entire movement is rooted in. So thank you for showing up and just letting that naturally flow out of you. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for this opportunity. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, guys. I love it.
Cathy, we have enjoyed it as well. I'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com. If you have any questions or comments, if you'd like to be a guest blogger, you've got something you'd like to say, and you want to get it maybe on our coach's blog, you can send us an email. 400 to 600 words is kind of what we're looking for. And put guest blogger in the subject line and then send that to coaching@gallup.com. And that really account is good for any questions that you might have. Again, coaching@gallup.com. If you want to catch the recorded audio, video, or just listen to this one again, you can catch everything we've ever done. All the video and audio is out there as well. It's on our coach's blog, coaching.gallup.com. We talked about certified strengths coaching in this. And if you want to see a list of all our courses that lead to that, even including some coaching for yourself, if you want to get that, you can head out to our courses page, courses.gallup.com, and it's all listed out there. And then if you want to stay up to date on everything we do around our live webcasts, you can get them in advance on our Eventbrite page. Just go to gallup.eventbrite.com. Don't forget, the Clifton Strengths Summit is coming up, and you might want to be here in Omaha, June 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Here in Omaha of 2019, that is. You might be listening to this after the fact. Chances are we still have another summit going on. Head out to CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. And if you get registered before March 15th, there's a price break that is available for you as well. Nice. Again, head out to CliftonStrengthsSummit.com. Join us on our Facebook group. Lots of questions being answered out there. Facebook.com/group/called2coach, all one word. I want to thank you for joining us today. We went a little late, but I think it was well worth it. We'll see you back here on the next Call to Coach. And with that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.